In this module, the students will learn how different environmental contexts also influence on the performance of exercise or any other physical events. This is important because most physical events are taking place in adverse environmental conditions. Sometimes it may be very hot, it may be very cold, it may be very hot. So whatever is the situation, the events must go on and the performers must do their best. That's why the students also should understand what are the factors that can influence the performance of the people. To begin with, I'll try to explain to you how we define the human thermal environment, in this case the cold environment. We will also understand how the heat exchange takes place by various routes. Either it is positively gained or it is negatively gained. Or in case of it is negative, there will be loss. If it is a positive, then we will gain heat. So under the circumstances of cold or hot environment, that will determine the amount of heat gained or lost by the human body. So once that is gained or lost, then it will obvious implication on the physiological responses. We will discuss about different kinds of physiological responses that might be encountered when we are exposed to cold, mild to extreme cold situations. Often we talk about the cold stress. Cold stress is also a condition which is essentially explains the human sensation of coldness. This also influenced by certain environmental parameters to which the human being are exposed. There are various indices by which the cold stress can be assessed or evaluated. One particular index, which is very old, called wind chill index, probably several decades now, it has been used by various personnel in various events of physical activity. Then we will discuss about how if a person is exposed to very cold condition or for a prolonged period, he also gets adapted to an extent. Either for a short duration or for long duration exposure, he gradually gets acclimatized to that kind of a situation. Sometimes we call it an acclimatization, sometimes we call it an adaptation to cold. If we cannot get adapted or to acclimatized, then there is a likelihood that cold injury might take place and different kinds of illnesses get manifested. In this topic, we will also discuss about what are the different types of illnesses can be observed. Briefly, we will spread over the discussions in 5 points. 1. In defining human thermal environment. The second, the physiological response to cold. Third, we will talk about the cold stress and wind chill index. Fourth, we will talk about the acclimatization to cold. And finally, we will discuss about cold injury and illness. In defining cold climate or environment, with reference to obviously human exposure, we always try to indicate a condition or tendency of heat loss. That means there is a negative heat storage from the body. Let me explain it a little better. When an ambient temperature of, let's say, 5 degrees centigrade, we may term it as cold. But let's say a person, healthy individual, properly clothed with all kinds of woolen garments, can he also get the sensation of cold? Probably no. This will be influenced by the conditions of clothing and other activity that he is performing. So ambient temperature alone is not an indicator of getting the feeling of warmth. That is, a person, his warmth sensation may move from hot to cold, whereas the ambient air temperature may not have changed at all. What is cold stress? Cold stress can only be identified or recognized only when there is drop in our internal body temperature. Probably we know earlier what we mean by internal body temperature. The temperature of the internal body can be measured from various locations, as we discussed earlier in relation to body temperature regulation. There are various sites: tympanic membrane, rectal temperature, oral temperature, and other places. If the body temperature is, let's say, 37 degrees centigrade, normal, and if it goes below 35 degrees centigrade, then often we call it that person is under the stress of cold or in an hypothermic situation. This environmental situation can arise when temperature is low, ambient temperature is low, there is high wind velocity, as well as the wetness of the clothing or skin surface. Let us put it this way. If a person is immersed in cold water, then his entire body is wet. This is one of the conditions. So there is a likelihood that body core temperature will fall rapidly. The heat transfer coefficient from skin to water might increase many folds when you are in cold immersion or swimming exercises. But that low temperature can also be arrived at by increasing high air movement or high air velocity. In that case also the core temperature will fall. However, the fall will be much less rapid in comparison to the conditions when somebody is immersed in cold water. As I mentioned, that internal core temperature is 37 degrees. It can go to 35, 34, 33, it can further go down. Let's say, hypothetical situation that core temperature is reaching below 30 degrees centigrade. Then human temperature control system becomes ineffective, and that may begin to experience impairment of various bodily functions. And that is a critical condition for all of us to avoid. Now let us discuss about the mechanism or the physiological response to cold. One of the basic function is the vascular adjustment. That means the blood vessels either gets vasoconstricted or vasodilated. Immediate response to cold is vasoconstriction of the blood vessels. If blood vessels are constricted, what will happen? It will reduce the blood flow to the skin, and it will also reduce the body heat loss. This is an adjustment by which we try to resist the further fall in our body temperature. Importantly, vasoconstriction occurs initially in the uncovered body areas of the. That means that if some area are uncovered, vasoconstriction will occur to those areas only, and then it may spread over to other regions. It may cause increased blood pressure, and there is also possibilities of a typical scenario called leakage of fluid from plasma to interstitium. There is an increased sympathetic activation, and also hemoconcentration may take place, which will ultimately lead to reduction in physical performance. In many winter athletes, the vasoconstriction or bronchoconstriction often lead to exercise-induced asthma. That's a situation often can be seen among the athletes exercised in cold. Another physiological response, which of considerable importance in generation of heat in the body, is called increase in muscular activity. We all know that when there is a muscular activity, it causes increase in the metabolic heat production. But there can be subconscious level of activity that might take place, which often we call as non-shivering thermogenesis. That means muscle get tensed, there is a stiffness in the muscles, and which will also cause some amount of increase in the metabolism. The other phenomena is called shivering. There is an involuntary contraction of muscles that can produce heat by increasing the metabolic rate. When we are exposed to cold and with less clothing, then we often find that our body is shivering. When the body temperature tends to fall, non-shivering thermogenesis occurs. But if the heat loss is still significant, then both core temperature and skin temperature falls, leading to conditions of further shivering of the body. To what extent? By shivering, heat production can increase up to 6 times the resting level of metabolic activity over a short period of time. And it can be about double in longer duration. In other words, any form of exercise inhibits shivering. That means it increases heat production. So some portion of heat is lost to the skin and the some is transferred to maintain the body temperature. So these are effective in advantageous situation by which some amount of non-shivering thermogenic as well as shivering activity can take place in order to adjust the further response to the cold. If temperature of the muscles are low, then ultimately it will lead to poor performance and coordination. And also the muscles and tendons are at risk to tear. During shivering, muscles become stiff and all movement becomes clumsy. There can be loss of sensory information, the blurring of vision. These are all associated phenomena when the shivering takes place. There is some response we also can see from the hormonal release. During cold stress, the calorogenic hormones like epinephrine and norepinephrine, which are released from adrenal medulla, can be increased substantially, and that partially account for increasing of the basal heat production. If the cold stress continues for a long time, prolonged heat stress, that can increase thyroid gland's release of thyroxine to elevate resting metabolism. These are two basic hormonal functions available in response to cold. Now let us talk about acclimatization to cold. By very nature, human body tries to maintain its warm microclimate always, even when climate is very cold. These are instinctive. You will find many such literature which says that human body or the entire community is maintained in such a microclimate by which the entire environment is not that very cold. The microclimate is warm. However, the evidences are inconclusive whether there is any mechanism exists by which the physiological acclimatization to cold can be properly explained. As of now, there are three possible understandings on the subject. One is called hypothermic. Second one is called as insulative. And third is metabolic. What is hypothermic? Hypothermic means it allows the body temperature to fall and thus reduce heat loss. The second one, it enhances the insulation, thereby preventing the cooling of the body. And the third is metabolic. It increases heat production, as I already mentioned about non-shivering thermogenesis. So these are the three possible understanding how cold acclimatization takes place. How long it takes? One can be acclimatized to cold in about 15 days. Evidences are gathering that the local acclimatization can also take place. That means the fingers and hand can also be locally acclimatized to cold condition. For people whose hands are regularly exposed to cold, exhibit less vasoconstriction and more prolonged cold-induced vasodilatation. And these are important approaches by which the manual performance or related sports events can be well performed in cold. In the beginning I mentioned about that the cold stress needs also to be assessed in terms of measurable dimension. One of the oldest approach was measuring the parameters of the climate and express it into an index called wind chill index. Pretty old. There are very standard conditions being created by which the different parameters of climate has been altered and the human responses have been achieved. That means it refers to an index value for the portion of the cooling of the human body, unclothed or uncovered areas of the body, which can be caused by air motion in combination with the air temperature. What is the level? When the air motion accelerates the rate of heat transfer from human body to the surrounding atmosphere, these temperature conditions are always below 7 degrees centigrade. That's a critical situation. For better clarity, I am explaining here how can we calculate this wind chill index, which is called as the WCI, which is a function of air velocity in meter per second and air temperature in degrees centigrade. In the equation you will find it has got a unit called watt per meter square. In this part, meter square means body surface area. If your body surface area is 1.5 meter, you are expressing it in terms of 1 meter square. So these couple of numerical numbers are originally proposed in order to arrive at the wind chill index. Often this is quoted as chilling temperature. So it is one side we are talking about the index, its unit is watt per square meter, and the other side we are talking about the chilling temperature, degrees centigrade. That means there is some kind of a correction is required or transformation is required in order to see how the chilling temperature is linked to the WCI. The equation that I am showing here is basically you can derive from the first upper equation to the lower one, by which you can arrive at both chilling temperature as well as wind chill index. This chart is very common. It's commonly used by various authorities for quick arriving at the wind chill values. So this is a calm conditions referring to the frostbite of 30 minutes, 10 minutes and 5 minutes. So we can arrive at the equation as a wind chill temperature in Fahrenheit or in centigrade by using these equations, and you can also get the respective conditions from the chart. For easy access to the students, I am also giving 3 reference levels of WCI and chilling index. This table is pretty big. It starts from pleasant condition to very flushy freeze. I am only showing at the beginning, at the middle point, when it is very cold, bitterly cold, and the flesh are freezing to an extreme. So these 3 conditions one can refer to other conditions also. What are the limitations of WCI? Primarily, WCI is applicable for the body areas that are not covered by clothing, uncovered. So if your body is clothed, including hands and feet, then WCI assessment will be severely exaggerated because of the importance of the wind. Therefore, there are many attempts have been made, particularly in Canada by the researchers. They tried to modify the WCI with adjustment to the wind velocity factors for wider applicability in assessing cold stress. So, what is the primary objective? That in exposure to cold, body can undergo hypothermia. That means internal body temperature can substantially fall from its initial normal range, and that can be resulting from low ambient temperature and high wind speed. So once think about sports events like marathon runners mountain hikers, long distance swimmers, they may be exposed to very dangerous levels of body temperature when the air temperature is low and there is high wind speed. There are evidences that from the English Channel swimmers that body build is an important determinant in the rate of cooling during long distance swimming. Because body build means body muscle as well as the body fat content. So insulative factors coming into the factor. Now let us talk about cold injury and illness. When the body becomes cold, there are specific parts of the body, local areas like extremities and face area, then cold injury can occur. That's why the nature of cold effects depends upon the duration of exposure. Sometimes it's called the freezing cold injury, or sometimes there can be non-freezing cold injury. In freezing cold injury, a commonly known phenomena is called frostbite. Frostbite occurs when the tissue fluid freezes. It can be temporary, it can be permanent. The skin tissue damage occurs by prolonged skin temperature at a very low level. That means if skin temperature is low, then one can get frostbite. There are many industrial situations even when people are working in cold, then also they have the tendency of getting frostbite. How it happens? Because the blood flow halts into those areas. So if you cannot rewarm those areas, then those people may have a permanent tissue damage like ears, nose, hand and feet are particularly very susceptible to frostbite. Let us specify the stages of frostbite. There are 3 specific stages. The first one is called frost knee. It's a pinch, a needle-like sensation. And the skin is unusually white and soft. These are moderate kind of frostbite. The second stage is called superficial, which is wax feeling, frozen numb, or blistering of skin that can be seen. Deep frostbites are those when the blood vessels, muscles, nerves, tendons, even bones show the damages. Blood clots, and then there can be likelihood of death of body tissues. So how do I identify? The first sign is redness or pain in any skin area when exposed to prolonged heat. The other signs include a whitish or grayish yellow skin area. The skin that feels unusually firm and waxy numbness. Unfortunately, people often are completely unaware that the frostbite is occurring to him, because all these frozen tissues are numb. So somebody else will have to identify that you have got the feeling you are probably developing frostbite. The frostbite can permanently damage the body, and severe case can lead to amputation of segments of the body. I have already mentioned about the frostnip, which is a mild form. The skin turns white as blood circulation decreases, and then it becomes quite painful. Apart from the non-freezing cold injuries, there can be non-freezing also, which can be resulting from prolonged exposure to wet, cold conditions. One common term is called immersion foot. That means the foot is immersed in a very, very cold, wet conditions for long time at the level of -1 to +4 degrees centigrade. That local non-freezing injury can take place within few weeks' time, resulting in permanent muscle and nerve damage. There are examples of this kind of scenario which are interchangeably used with immersion foot. Is called trench foot. We are showing a picture from British Army that shows that how the fingers of the feet are completely gone because of the necrosis of the tissue, and those are permanent damages that can be seen in case of exposure to wet and cold conditions. This occurs when blood vessels constrict due to heat loss, reduce blood flow to the extremities, and moreover depriving cells of oxygen and nutrients. Nerves are especially sensitive under such situation. There are other situations also which sometimes being confused as a skin reaction. The localized areas of erythema, swelling, pain, resulting from repeated exposure to dry cold. These are all seen in fingers of the hand and feet. Though mechanisms are unclear, blistering or ulceration may occur. Chilblains is the common term, most commonly affect the fingers or the pre-tibial area. Occasionally, the symptoms may recur for a long time. With this, I'll end up discussions on exercise performance and cold environment. Thank you.